Thank you for joining us for The Drive Back, the movie podcast where we imitate our favorite thing to do after a movie, which of course is to talk about it on the drive home. I'm Garrett, and as always, I'm joined by my good friend and co host, Adrian.
Hey, how you doing?
And today, we've got another First Timers, which is a fun, exciting episode to do. What is a First Timers, Adrian?
First timer is where both Garrett and I have not seen the film, so we will be watching it here for the first time.
Hence the not so clever name. That's right, and today we've got the Wachowski sisters sci-fi epic that isn't The Matrix or Cloud Atlas, Jupiter Ascending. So all of this and more coming up on the drive back. Alrighty, so first timers for Jupiter Ascending. I remember this movie getting released in theaters and seeing the trailers for it while I think this came out while I was in community college, so definitely remember that time period. So I believe, though, I believe that you were the one that recommended we watch this one for our first timers. So what made you decide to do this one?
I feel like I saw this movie and I saw the trailer for it, and it was one of those movies that when I was younger just looked like it would be good. Upon review, I don't think the trailer gives that same notion anymore. But I think it definitely did, and I think that was one of those things like my memory was like, oh, I remember that movie, but I didn't get to see it, so wanted to watch it.
Yeah, like I remember it looking cool. And, well, Adrian, to start it off, was that prediction accurate?
Well, there are parts of this movie, very small parts, that are pretty good. But I would say no. The movie as a whole is pretty terrible. Those little tiny performances and neat action sequences are not enough to save a movie that ends up basically being like an attempt at a space political thriller.
Yeah.
That just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
None of the plot lines up with itself. So just very, very not what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think I have to give it credit. It is trying to do something new. It is trying to start a storyline, which you got to give credit for.
Absolutely.
But I feel like there's always those movies that you can tell it's supposed to be the first chapter of something, like Jupiter Ascending, Jupiter this, and then Jupiter that for the end movie or
I
whatever.
think it was a trilogy, right? Or something like that?
Maybe it was supposed to be, but maybe it's a good
Who
thing that
knows?
it's not. Because again, it's trying to start something new, and it has some pretty unique and inventive visuals, especially with like the spaceships and a lot of what's like the best thing I can say is like slip space from Halo, but like when they shoot through that portal, and it's
And it
like
like tears open, yeah.
yeah, like that's super cool. But other than that, no, this movie falls flat. Pretty
Yeah,
much
I don't know.
everywhere.
I really, to me, honestly, it felt like there was a lot of unused footage. That's how this movie felt like. I feel like this might be a movie that got ruined on the editing floor. This movie felt like it was designed as a space action packed blockbuster, and on the editing floor, like maybe the scenes just or the CGI wasn't coming together, or the scenes weren't, and the only scenes that worked were these political scenes. That's kind of how it felt. Like it felt pieced together.
Hmm.
Because, like, for example, small spoiler, I guess. But Jupiter, every time she's like, "Oh, what was his name? Wise,
Oh, Kane or something like that.
Kane Wise or something."
Yeah,
But Kane, every time she's like, "Oh, he's gone." Literally, like 6 times in the movie, he comes back and saves her as she's about to sign her life away.
yeah.
Like it, but why does that keep happening? Like it doesn't.
And especially when you have two directors, you feel like you should have some more of a semblance, and their family.
Yeah,
Like Joe and Anthony Russo. Like their family members, they should be a little bit tighter knit to get
you'd
this
think.
done. But it
Maybe it
just
was
didn't
the
work.
vision, though. Maybe that's what it was. Maybe that's it.
Maybe the vision itself was flawed, but before we dive any further, if you have not watched it yet, because we usually give these teases for the next episode at the end of the previous one, if you have not watched it yet and you would like to, which I think both of us would say don't waste your time, it is available for rent only, which I'm sure will automatically turn off a lot of people.
Oh, and I do want to clarify that this is not Jupiter's Legacy, which is the Netflix show of a completely different variety.
Yeah.
So this is Jupiter Ascending.
Yes, this is a film podcast. We do not cover TV shows until that one episode at the end of the year where we talk about our favorite things of the year. That's about it. So it's kind of hard. I can see why people can get it confused, especially if you type in Jupiter on IMDb. The first thing that comes up is Jupiter's Legacy, which,
yeah.
I mean, I guess cool, but even that got canceled, so who knows. But yeah, let's go ahead and talk. First off, let's be a little bit more positive. Let's talk about the things that do work in this movie, which we've kind of already highlighted. The first one I would say we both agree on is the visuals, right?
80% of the time.
I feel like that's fair. I would say about 75, yeah.
Yeah, something around there. When it's great, it's really good.
Yeah.
And when it's bad, it looks like I am in front of a green screen. Like, it looks like a Zoom conference call green screen at times.
Yes, and I think I know exactly what you're speaking of. Are you talking about the gravity boot original, like the rescue thing from I think it's like the clinic? Like,
no, I'm talking about when I forget the actor's name, but like the guy that speaks like this. That guy?
Not there yet, Eddie Redmayne.
But like when he appears through like literally a pixelated screen. And he literally has like a glow around him that looks like green screen cut off. Like, it looks so bad.
Maybe he's just radiating, Adrian.
Yeah, maybe.
But this actually just reminds me, I forgot to read what this movie's even about, because we wanted to jump into how bad this movie was. So this movie was released in 2015, and it was directed by Lana and Lily Wachowski, and stars Mila Kunis, Channing Tatum, and Eddie Redmayne, who we just talked about. A young woman discovers her destiny as an heiress of an intergalactic nobility and must fight to protect the inhabitants of Earth from an ancient and destructive industry. Cool. Now that we got that out of the way. Yeah, Eddie Redmayne is terrible in this movie, which sucks because he's an Oscar-winning actor.
I think he won. Yeah, and honestly, like, I don't know if it was his portrayal or if it was the writing, but he had the voice. He had a vibe. Something was there.
And then there's that one moment, I think it's the first or second scene with him, he's talking with like a lieutenant, and he's just like, yes, if you could find her for me, that would be great. And then out of nowhere, he just yells.
Yeah, he's like, ah!
That's so weird. Like, whose decision was that? Was that Eddie's? Was that the Wachowskis? Or was that like, somewhere in the writing room, they're like, he has to only talk like he's constipated.
And then the script said, screams abruptly, end scene.
It's like, find her or something like that. Like, I think they were trying to go for that similar punch that in Man of Steel General Zod had before he got put in that prison. And he was like, I will find him, and that was cool. And they're like, let's do that except worse.
But it was zero energy.
Yeah. To
like,
maximum.
Flip it up, and then it cuts. And then it was like, oh, okay, goodbye. But I did want to say about positives, I feel like I did like Channing Tatum. I feel like he did a pretty good job. I don't know. I thought he fit the role pretty well. I mean, his makeup and stuff, like the character was kind of odd, but I feel like he did a good job with what he had.
I would say that I think for an action-centric role with not the most amount of talking and really no comedy from him at all.
No.
Like it is kind of a little bit of a departure for him.
Yeah.
I don't think the performance is necessarily good.
Okay.
I would say it's a little flat. I mean, it does.
It was okay.
It gets a little better towards the end, especially.
Oh yeah, maybe.
But
yeah.
It is a little flat on arrival, but
yeah.
But yeah. So you were saying more about positives?
I thought he did okay. I thought Mila Kunis was awesome just because she's Mila Kunis. Her performance was pretty subpar, but love that she's in the film.
Yeah, great that she's getting a major role like that. I mean,
like a lead.
Go anywhere.
Yeah, but it's still, I mean, she nailed the lead in a space oddity or Odyssey film. Like, it was pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Maybe it's more of a space oddity.
Yeah.
Haha. Find her!
Not when I'm drinking water.
But I can't even think of the other dude's name. Like, literally from the other cop guy.
Oh, Sean Bean.
Yeah, I thought he was okay.
Also, a movie where he did not die.
Is that a thing about
Sean
him?
Bean dies in every movie he's in.
I did not know that.
Or, pretty much. I think we found the one movie so far that he hasn't died in.
Well, the movie itself died, so that's okay.
God, you're right. I gotta scratch that one off the list. Oh,
but I thought he did okay. I thought he actually brought kind of a lot of more interesting points, like, to the film. In a film that is mostly telling instead of showing.
Yeah.
I feel like he helped facilitate that a little bit, so that was pretty nice.
Yeah, I think he was probably the only performance I would say that was the side of decent, because he brings a weight to it. Like, no other actor in this movie really has any kind of serious Hollywood kind of clout or anything like that. Like, most of them have been in several different projects. You know, Channing Tatum is a big actor, but, you know, not really dramatic. Whereas Sean Bean has been in, you know, a lot since since kind of first getting into the industry. So, but yeah, the other positive that I highlighted was the fact that they were trying to start something new. Like, I will say that a lot of the ideas, as stupid as they may seem, were on the fresh side. Like, at least they tried to work in, like, conspiracy theory into the plot.
Yeah.
The fact that these, like, they're basically the gray aliens that everyone knows were abducting people, but like, you're like, okay, so how do we explain abductions in this sci-fi story? It's to create them into, you know, to take them and farm them, essentially, which I thought was really interesting, but it was still kind of stupid.
I did want to point out that I absolutely hate the use of invisibility in this film.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, because it makes no sense. If you're invisible, why would you ever become visible? There's zero reason for the aliens to ever be seen except to be on camera. Which, to me, took me out. And, oh my gosh, there's this one scene where he's, like, riding his little bike up to the farm. And he waits until he's, like, down the street to turn invisible. And he's literally, like, in the cornfields. And he's going, and he's, like, literally maybe, like, I don't know distance, but he's maybe, like, a quarter mile from the property, and then he goes invisible. And I just don't understand the purpose of, like, everyone always became visible for the camera, and I guess that just took me out of it, because if you have invisibility, and you can see, and you can clearly function, and you can do whatever you need to do while invisible, why would you ever come uninvisible while you're doing the activity you went invisible for? Mm-hmm. Just didn't get it. Did not get it.
Yeah, that wasn't even something that crossed into my brain.
It was terrible.
I'm glad that you brought that up. One of the other things I wanted to talk about, though, and specifically get your opinion on, because you have mentioned this before, specifically in, I remember, the Pacific Rim episode.
Okay.
What did you think of the cinematography in this movie?
I liked what it was going for.
Okay. Because there's a couple of sequences where the camera doesn't feel like it's realistically placed.
That's what I was going to say. I like what they were going for, but I certainly, like, even like I'm talking about with the invisibility, there's certain things that really take me out of a film. Mm-hmm. And one of them is absolutely ridiculous, fantastical camera runs. Like, I'm fine if the camera is still in a place that it normally can't be. Like, that's fine. Like, okay, let's say you figured out how to do that. But when cameras, like, go through, like, like they start doing flips and flying all around, it's like, that's just not true. Yeah. And you can tell, and it really pulls me out of a film the same way a lot of, like the green screen did. It's just one of those things that I always tend to notice. Mm-hmm. And I just know that what I'm looking at is 100% fake. And I would reference a movie like Shang-Chi, because they had a pretty fantastical camera shot when they're on the scaffolding. I think Corridor Crew covered this, but it actually, like, goes through a couple, like, the camera, like, flies a little bit, but it ends in a real shot.
Yeah.
So it kind of like takes you. It has the momentum of the scene, but then it grounds you again. And this movie does not ground you after it does these insane maneuvers. So yeah,
I feel like if
did not like.
anything, maybe the wrong lessons were taken from The Matrix, because The Matrix was so like, because it's the same directors.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
what they did with that film is they revolutionized visual effects and even the unrealistic camera movement, like the one round where Agent Smith and Neo are kind of twisting in the air, where that, like in the
Yeah,
the famous bullet time sequence, like that's not a realistic camera shot because it's done faster than a human being could move, but it works because you're in a simulation and you understand that.
and it makes sense. Yeah,
And that lesson being taken here is like, well, there's a problem of like visual effects over just making a good movie, right? Like, don't just shove visual effects into this movie because that's what you're known for doing. Focus on making a good movie first.
yeah,
But that same thing with the camera, like you're now in the real world, right?
yeah.
So you can't have zooming cameras and like the chase sequences towards the beginning with the gravity boots or whatever, and even the whole flying chase sequence in Chicago, which went on for way too long, by the way.
Oh, what, like 7 minutes, if
That
not
was like
more?
an ending climax moment that was done towards the beginning. I was like, whew, where are we going after this one?
Yeah,
And it was nowhere good.
big Transformer vibes though.
Oh yeah, I could see
From
that.
like the shots in the city of the city being destroyed by robots. Like,
Yeah, it was just a weird sequence, and I liked how they explained the afterward though, when the city was destroyed.
when they just fix it.
Like they fix it, but they're like, well, like, do you remember taking that photo? Like they'll wipe your
Oh,
memory, and he's like, every time something happens, they wipe someone's memory, and there's a few people they don't get, but whoever believes them, and it literally
yeah.
is going back to that conspiracy theory thing, which I thought was kind of really
Which I
cool.
think makes sense, right? Like that is a smart, that be like the Men in Black, right? You miss one, but
Yeah.
who's gonna believe those few nut jobs that say they saw a UFO?
Well, don't say who's going to believe a couple of nut jobs, because that's what happened when we got January 6th. So just gotta throw that out there. But
But I will say that is also right. I mean, just about conspiracy theories, if you keep missing a couple people here and there, eventually you have what we technically have on Earth, which is tens of thousands of people with corroborated evidence about certain events
yeah,
that only that group of people remember. And then you have a cult on your hands, Mila Kunis, okay?
the cult of Jupiter,
Yeah.
which is pretty much what I thought it was going to be at the start, when like
Mm-hmm.
Sean Bean and his daughter were like, "Your Majesty," which, by the way, the bee sequence is stupid.
Oh, so dumb.
Like,
She doesn't know they're not going to sting her.
yeah, she's like,
There's like
and she's just
bees.
covered in bee stings, like,
There's like 1,000 bees, and she's like, "Have you guys seen these bees?" And she just starts moving her hands around.
and they're just like stinging her the entire time. Like, I think it takes like 100 bee stings can kill a person.
Something like that.
And there's like
People have died, yeah.
there's a couple thousand there, so she's just like, ah ha ha ha, like and they're just swatting them away. There was a lot of bees in the movie. I don't know if you noticed that, but like
Not after that scene. Huh.
well, towards the beginning,
Oh, okay.
and they were just swatting them. Like, who does that? Like,
Who
just walk
kills
away. Like, they're dying out. The poor bees. Yeah, that whole sequence was just stupid, though. But,
I will say I did like, from a sci-fi perspective, I did like the idea of a certain sequence of DNA repeating itself. I just think that's a neat concept. Like, I feel like that's a great sci-fi foundation. Probably not executed as well as it could have been in this movie, but I would like to read a book about that scenario.
yeah.
I think that'd be super, super interesting. So I liked that. But otherwise, I mean, yeah, that's kind of my whole thoughts are like, it just doesn't land. It tries like 17, 20 different things, and just none of them go all the way home.
Yeah. I like that's exactly how I feel. But saying that, you want to transition into some final thoughts before a score?
Sure, yeah, I think this movie is a movie that lied to itself, in what it thought it was going to be versus what it actually ended up being, which is, I think it thought that it was going to be the summer blockbuster action space film of the year, and what it ended up being was like a poor man's space civil war. And it just doesn't hit home on any of those things. I think the acting is good at times, visual effects are good most of the time, but none of that is enough to hit any sort of home run at all. It's more of a foul ball on this one.
Absolutely. And what did you give it for a score?
I went back and forth on this because I don't think it's like, I mean, it is pretty bad, but I went back and forth between a couple vastly different scores. But I ended up giving this one of my lower scores to date, which is a 45.
Interesting. Okay. So as far as my final thoughts, I thought that, pretty much echoing a lot of what you said, I think that it has some unique and interesting visuals and a couple of ideas. And I give it credit for trying to start like a new universe, trying to be like a new Matrix for the Wachowskis. But I do think the film is pretty much at the point of uninteresting. It's filled with bad performances. And I do think that it commits the cardinal sin of just not being fun. When it's definitely trying to be, which that has to fall flat. But because of that, I gave Jupiter Ascending a 29.
That's fair.
So,
I get it.
Not one of the lowest scores I've given, but also not among the better ones. I would say John Carter is a better film than this.
Very similar.
Very similar, but better.
Yeah. I would say I liked John Carter more than I liked.
Absolutely. So, but that is going to bring us to an end for this First Timers for Jupiter Ascending, which was definitely an interesting one to take a look at. Next week, oh boy, have we got a big one for next week. Get ready to take a journey with us through Middle-earth as we take a look at the critically acclaimed Lord of the Rings films and the critically mixed Hobbit films. So we'll definitely be taking a look at all 6 of those movies, the theatrical cuts where possible to try and keep the viewing time down. Although and
those are definitely more of an entry point for a lot of new viewers if they're going to watch them.
Absolutely, yeah. So but that's going to be for next week. I believe all of them can be found on HBO Max now. So hopefully they're all available on there. And then Adrian, if we have some eager young members of the Fellowship that want to, follow us, where can they find us online?
Mount Sauron. They can find
Mount
us
Doom?
at.
Did you say Mount Sauron?
Oh, I meant
Mount
his
Doom.
eye. It's my first time watching him.
That's all good. Go ahead.
I just watched him. Okay, it was a lot.
It's a lot of info.
No, but you can find us if you're looking to follow or stay up to date. You can find us at the Drive Back Podcast here on YouTube. Go ahead and like and subscribe and hit the bell. We post every Monday, as well as out-of-cycle updates for exclusive content like midnight premieres and stuff like that. The Drive Back Podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, any of those other podcasting apps. You can find us. Make sure to follow. We post regularly every Monday on all of those. And if you want to talk to us or chat with us, Instagram is our preferred social media. And you can find us at The Drive Back Podcast. And we post there every time we have a new episode, just to remind you that there might be something you're interested in. So if you see a picture of something you like, or you see that we're covering something you like, go ahead and give the episode a listen.
That's absolutely right. And if you would like to see, I don't know if Adrian, have you made your own blog yet to start doing?
I have not. No.
Well, if you do, you can link it here like I will. You can find my blog, which will be linked down below in the YouTube description, but it is going to be GarrettO'KeefeFilm.blogspot.com, where I post reviews for new stuff, which we haven't really had the time to be doing any kind of new movie release reviews, just because of scheduling and stuff like that. But you can find my reviews there. By the time this comes out, there will be reviews for Halloween Kills and for The Last Duel that will be updated on there, as well as my usual catching up posts. So, always available there. But thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week in the lands of Middle-earth. We love you so much. We'll see you next time on The Drive Back. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Drive Back. Make sure to be on the lookout for new episodes every Monday, and make sure to follow us on social media.